Good afternoon, I'm Mike Amor. It's 4 o'clock on a day we learned the devastating extent of Melbourne's extended lockdown. It's set to drag on for months. 120 new cases today, the majority out in the community. And a warning, infections are set to rise. Playgrounds to reopen, but no real relief until 70% are vaccinated. A huge business blow. No plan, no hope for thousands facing financial ruin. No return to class for term 3 with year 12s to get vaccine priority from next week. And Western Australia blocks Eddie Maguire from attending the AFL Grand Final.
Live from Melbourne, this is 7's Afternoon News with Mike Amor.
First at 4, it was a day we were meant to be told the thresholds needed for more freedom. Instead, we've learned Melbourne's lockdown is set to drag on for at least another 2 months. Small changes to restrictions will only kick in when 70% of adults have had at least one COVID jab. That's in around 3 weeks' time. There's 120 new COVID cases today, and Melbourne is now on track to be locked down for the longest time of any city in the world. The only concession from Friday, playgrounds will reopen for under 12s and just one masked parent. But students will not be heading back to classrooms until at least term 4.
What we must do is suppress case numbers sufficient to buy us time to get people vaccinated. Then we can vaccinate faster than cases grow. If we opened up, that would not be the case. In fact, cases would grow so much faster than we can vaccinate people. And that means our hospitals will be full, and that means COVID patients and all patients, regardless of what you need, will have their care compromised. But it is now clear to us that we are not going to drive these numbers down. They are instead going to increase.
It's not what we wanted to hear. Estelle Grieping has crossed the details. Estelle, take us through what to expect over the next few weeks.
Well, Mike, as we just heard from the Premier, there are some restrictions easing, but they mostly relate to playgrounds and at-home care. So from Thursday midnight, kids will be able to go and play in playgrounds, and those who are primary school aged will be able to be babysat if both of their parents are authorised workers. But most other restrictions are staying put, and that's because authorities are deeply concerned about our case numbers. 80% of today's 120 cases weren't in isolation, and we also have 58 people in hospital. There will be small changes to restrictions when 70% of the population have had at least one dose. That should be in around 3 weeks' time. That's also when exercise limits will be increased to 3 hours, the travel bubble extended to 10 kilometres, and outdoor skate parks and gyms will reopen. Now, the government is expecting case numbers to rise, and it's now banking on high vaccination rates to protect the community.
Well, there's going to be very significant restrictions. A lockdown in some form is going to be there to contain cases until we get the vaccination rates as high as possible, until we reach not just first dose vaccination thresholds, but second dose vaccination thresholds as outlined in the National Cabinet Plan, the 70% 2-dose and 80% 2-dose.
So, Mike, it's not the news we were wanting to hear, although a lot of us were expecting it. Lockdown 6 is being extended. In some good news, though, our regional communities are probably going to get out of lockdown next week. That's apart from Shepparton. Mike?
Estelle, thank you. Today's announcement is a major blow for Melbourne businesses. For his view, let's bring in Paul Guerra from the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Paul, there's really nothing for businesses anytime soon. I can only imagine how heartbroken they must be.
Yeah, it's a tough day for business today, again, after so many tough days over the last 12 months. Look, we knew it was never going to be easy with the case numbers where they are, and we know we all have a role to play there. But what business needed to hear today was certainty, and they needed some hope. We needed a plan, but all we got was a plan to have a plan. What we need to understand is when business will be able to open again, when business will be able to trade again, so that we can start planning with a level of certainty that's required.
It seems apparent that we're going to be in lockdown for at least the next month, maybe more. What does that mean for the future of Melbourne's once vibrant hospitality, events and retail industries?
Across the board, there's no good news today. You know, businesses in crisis across this state, not only those sectors but beyond, but there's emerging crises as well. We're hearing about the mental health crisis. It's not just children, it's across workers as well. We're hearing about the worker crisis where they're choosing to go to other states to work. We know the school kids, they're in crisis as well. They haven't been back in the classroom. So we're seeing all of this merge out of what was once the COVID crisis. In many ways, we've got a COVID crisis lasagna and we just need a way out of it.
What would you have liked to have seen today? More than just a plan, what restrictions could have been eased to give some businesses hope in the future?
Yeah, so for starters, let's go back to where we were pre-lockdown, lockdown 4 and lockdown 5. Let's get back to those levels. What will it take to get back there? Then we can start focusing on the National Cabinet framework, which tells us at 70 and 80% vaccination rates, other things would be possible. We need to see the details in and around that. And then finally, we're 11% behind where New South Wales are in the first dose of vaccination. How are we going to catch that up? What's the plan to do that? So within each of those steps, some real clarity around what can happen when we get there. So instead of being disappointed today, we can sit there and cheer home those numbers as we get closer to those.
We've said it before, but we wish your members all the best. Paul Guerra, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
And as we just heard there, small businesses were expecting a roadmap today, but instead they got a dead end. Nick McCallum caught up with the deflated owners of a family-run pub now on its knees.
I'm at Richmond's famous Rising Sun Hotel with the publican Liam Riordan. You've just watched the premiere. What's your reaction?
Not great. Not much of a change today like we were all expecting. The lifting of the curfew would have been a great thing if possible, but that's really nothing we can look forward to. Just if we were given a roadmap, a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, then we'd be great. If we actually had an idea where our future was going, we'd be happy. But right now, we're just in limbo. We're basically treading water, so we don't know if it's sink or swim.
Clearly, you're very deflated.
Stressed, deflated, worried for my family.
This is very much a family operation. We spoke to your parents a short time ago. This is what they had to say.
Well, you can probably tell I'm pretty stressed with things at the moment. You know, if it wasn't for family, I don't know what we'd be doing.
We'd be walking away.
Yeah,
if our sons weren't working in the pub, we'd be walking away. I'm having days I can't get out of bed because it's so bad. That's how bad it is.
So, Liam, basically they say they're going on because of you and your brothers. How does that make you feel?
I'm very proud of my father. He's been in the industry since he was born, basically. We all have. For us to continue his legacy, my grandfather's legacy, that's the most important thing.
So overall, how do you feel after hearing what the Premier had to say?
Honestly, quite disgusted. No words. It's just nothing we can do. It's just absolutely heartbreaking.
Okay, thank you very much. That's Liam Riordan from Richmond's famous Rising Sun Hotel.
Nick McCallum reporting there. Let's go live now to Professor Peter Collignon, infectious diseases physician from the Australian National University. Professor, you probably heard some of that. A lot of Victorians are feeling very deflated right now. Is this the strategy, the way to go here?
Well, I think the strategy is to get people vaccinated because vaccination is the way out of this. The trouble is that doesn't happen overnight. You need 2 shots of the vaccine to get full protection, and it takes a couple of weeks after that to get it as well. But what we do know is that the effects this year are much less than last year because at least we have a large proportion of people over the age of 50 vaccinated. And you can already see in New South Wales and to some degree in Victoria as well, instead of having about 4% or 4 in 100 people who got COVID last year dying, it is probably tenfold less than that this year. Now, that's not, acceptable still because there's so many people unvaccinated, but it just shows if we get vaccinated, the consequences to an individual and the consequences to people around you are markedly decreased. And that's why vaccination is so important to get that number up to 70% at least and preferably 80% and higher.
Speaking of vaccination, the government's aiming for September 23 to have 70% of Victorians half vaccinated. How effective is one dose?
Well, one dose gives you reasonable protection, but not complete protection. It gives you about 70% of what you would get if you get 2 doses. So that's one of the reasons for getting it out there, even with single dose and even spreading them apart so you can get more people vaccinated a bit earlier, because one dose is better than none. But the strategy has got to be to get people double vaccinated. Now, the reality is we should achieve that for a large proportion of the population, at least 70% by October. And by November, in end of November, it ought to be 80%. That's quite achievable. We still don't have enough Pfizer vaccine, but more is coming in. Towards the end of September, there should be 2 million doses a week arriving in Australia. But what we have plenty of is the AstraZeneca vaccine that's manufactured in Melbourne. So particularly anybody over the age of 50, if you're not vaccinated, go and see your doctor and your GP tomorrow, or your pharmacist tomorrow, and get vaccinated. And for people under that, they can have that as well. They just have to have maybe a discussion with their GP first, re the risk for them, which is about 1 in a million that they might get this rare side effect, this clotting they die of. But to put that in perspective, if you ride a bicycle, your risk is much higher than that. So we need to get some of these risks in proportion against the effects of COVID, but also the effects on us socially and mentally if we don't get more people vaccinated more quickly, what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do.
Yeah, I've had both doses of AstraZeneca. I recommend it to those who can get it. Peter Collignon, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It's been revealed one of 2 women who died at home from COVID-19 had not been tested for the virus. The Premier says the positive status of the 49-year-old Northcote woman was only confirmed by a coroner. The other woman from Hume and in her 60s was in her 2nd week of infection.
I don't believe either of them had been through the vaccine program.
Health officials will ask the women's families if they'd like to share their stories to encourage other people to get tested and vaccinated. There are new exposure alerts across Melbourne. Additional Tier 1 sites are All Pass & Associates law firm in Kilsyth last week, Empire Screens Craigieburn on the 27th, Quality Hotel in Parkville on the 27th and 28th, and PWG Glass Group Tullamarine over 4 days. And in breaking news, Tier 1 sites have just been updated. In Richmond, Pass Group head office on Church Street is an exposure site over 3 days last week, and there's an alert for the apartment block at 4 Peterson Avenue in Coburg North over 12 days. 3 neighbouring apartment blocks on the same street are Tier 2. Eddie Maguire's bid to travel to Western Australia for the AFL Grand Final has been knocked back. Up next, why the former Collingwood president and his sons were denied a border permit. Plus, a killer who murdered her aunt while she was heavily pregnant is jailed. And a new crackdown on door-to-door sales. Back soon, across Victoria and Tasmania. Live from Melbourne, you're watching 7's Afternoon News. How good is it out there right now? 23 degrees outside. Jane Bunn will be here with the forecast later in the hour. Former Collingwood president Eddie Maguire has been denied entry into Perth for the grand final. As Georgia Love reports, WA authorities say he's not essential.
He's Eddie everywhere except for Western Australia. The former Collingwood president denied entry into the state for the grand final because his role as a broadcaster is not deemed essential. Maguire had planned to get on a plane last night with his 2 sons, who he'd listed as his producers. He said the plan was for them to put him to air across numerous shows while quarantining at Perth's luxury Crown complex. Then they'd be allowed out in time for game day at Optus Stadium. But WA Premier Mark McGowan said he didn't qualify, with only restricted numbers being allowed into the state from COVID hotspots.
Police make these decisions. We've got very restricted numbers of people coming in, but obviously the AFL has essential people. Mr Maguire was not one of them.
So I'm not being uppity. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I'm not doing anything like that. I understand the fragility of what COVID brings.
Maguire says he realistically has about 2 days to reapply for the permit, and that he will. He believes his role providing coverage is essential.
The Western Australian Police Chief says, no, we don't think you're essential. Then I cop that and I don't have any protest whatsoever.
If his G2G permit isn't approved again, it will be the first grand final in 45 years Eddie Maguire has missed.
A killer will spend at least 13 years behind bars for the death of respected greyhound trainer Karen Leake. Jessie Moore was pregnant when she attacked her aunt with a hammer. She then went to KFC, returning the next day to pretend to discover the body. The judge sentenced Moore for a maximum of 18 years jail, saying she had an entirely dysfunctional upbringing. There's a fresh crackdown on dodgy sales tactics with a ban on door-to-door sales for all Solar Victoria programs from today. The ban follows consultation and support from the industry's peak bodies and retailers. Dodgy sales behaviour should be reported to Consumer Affairs Victoria. Sport is up next with all the finals build-up. Plus, the Magpies unveil their new coach as Craig McRae gets the nod. And later, Baby Zebra Joy at Werribee Zoo. Stay with us right here on 7. Sport now with Andrew McCormack and Macca. The Magpies have their man.
Mike, Craig McRae has today officially been announced as the new Collingwood coach. The 47-year-old has come from an assistant role at Hawthorn this year after 5 years at the Tigers. McRae, the final man standing in an interview process that lasted almost 2 months. He was announced without any fanfare today at the club due to the COVID lockdown.
I'm not a star of the game, retiring great, a big name if you like, but I wouldn't want it any other way. This is my journey, it's my story, all the resilience along the way and the hardship and all the successes. It's shaped me to be the person I am, and I sit here really comfortable in the seat just to be the best person for the job.
He's very relationship orientated, and his style is one that works alongside players to bring out their very best.
Pies caretaker coach Robert Harvey has agreed to end his 10-year association with the Magpies. The Toby Green umpire bump saga is set to continue. Chief football reporter Tom Brown has more. And Tom, the AFL will appeal the 3-week suspension.
Andrew, good afternoon. The AFL will appeal the 3-week suspension. Gil McLachlan very disappointed with the verdict yesterday, but we don't know when they'll appeal. I think GWS are very keen for this process not to interrupt now their finals campaign, albeit Green out of the side. He's still with the side, though, over in Perth. Now, Stephen Cornelio spoke today. He spoke on his form and his contract. We'll have more on that at 6 o'clock. But in particular on Green, admitted he was disappointed by Green's actions. But again, on this distraction point, they don't want to discuss it until after they're out of the finals.
Toby himself has, shown remorse, obviously, for his actions and to the umpire for his actions, and you just simply can't do that in our game, and we hold the umpires in such high regard and treat them with a lot of respect. So definitely disappointed he won't be running out with us.
Andrew, moving to the Bulldogs, who remain here in Launceston ahead of their trip to Brisbane on Friday. They're going to have to do it the hard way, coming to Tasmania, going to Brisbane, then going to Adelaide, then Perth if they're to get through to the grand final. It doesn't bother the Bulldogs.
We knew we were going to have to do it the hard way once Brisbane won a couple of weeks ago and we missed out on that top 4 position. But we know we've travelled pretty well in recent history, and there's obviously a few more stops to go before we get to Perth.
Now, Andrew, 10 teams out. There's lots going on at one club in particular, Carlton. They're trying to put together a subcommittee to search for this coach. I'll have the latest inside word on that shortly in our bulletin at 6 o'clock.
Thanks very much, Tom Brown in Launceston there. Geelong won't be taking the Giants lightly on Friday night, even without the suspended Toby Green. The Cats were upset by 19 points only a month ago by the Giants, and Zach Tui has likened them to the Tigers.
When they get going, they're very hard to stop. They're a little bit Richmond-esque in terms of how they play. And obviously we saw how dangerous they can be just a few weeks ago, so it's fresh in our minds what they're capable of.
Tui returns after missing the last few weeks with a hamstring strain. That is all for sport, Mike. Richmond-esque, let's hope for the Giants' sake that's maybe last year's Richmond rather than
exactly, not this year's version.
Recent Richmond. Yeah.
Thanks, Macca. Thanks for rubbing it in. One of Werribee Open Range Zoo's miracle babies is thriving. 2-month-old Fala, the zebra foal, is finally getting to explore the savannah on her own. Her mother gave birth to her while undergoing extensive treatment for a tumour. She's also getting to know her sisters in the zoo. Melbourne's lockdown is set to drag on for 2 more months. Small changes will only kick in once 70% of adults have had at least one COVID jab. Everything you need to know is just ahead. Plus, no return to school until at least term 4. as Year 12s get priority vaccination. And 120 new cases today, while the government is banking on vaccinations to flatten the curve. We're back in just a couple of minutes.
Live from Melbourne, this is 7's Afternoon News with Mike Amor.
Welcome back. Melbourne's lockdown is set to drag on for around 2 more months, with authorities saying restrictions can only significantly ease when the vast majority of the population is double vaccinated. There's 120 new cases today and 58 COVID patients are in hospital. Playgrounds will open on Friday with QR codes, and there are minor changes to in-home care. There'll be a greater easing when at least 70% of the population has at least 1 dose in around 3 weeks' time. That's when the travel limit will be expanded to 10 kilometres and people can exercise up to 3 hours a day. Outdoor gyms and skate parks will open and private house inspections given the green light.
Absolutely, it's tough, and 3 weeks seems like an eternity. That light at the end of the tunnel is too dim and the tunnel is too long, but it is a light at the end of the tunnel. It is the genuine pathway out of here that means that we can take those small steps forward bit by bit.
We've thrown everything at this, but it is now clear to us that we are not going to drive these numbers down. They are instead going to increase. Now it's up to us to make sure that they don't increase too fast and that they don't increase too much relative to the number of people who are getting vaccinated every single day, every single week.
Let's bring in Opposition Leader Michael O'Brien. Mr O'Brien, you say that we didn't get a plan today. What would your plan have been?
G'day, Mike. Look, Victorians were looking for a plan and hope from Daniel Andrews today, and they got neither of those. What we need is a plan to get our kids back into school. The damage that's being done to them, not just educationally, but their mental health by being kept at home, it is appalling, and we need a plan to get those kids back into the classroom. We didn't get that today. We need a plan to be able to... When can families finally see each other again? Where was that plan? It wasn't there. Where's the plan to let small businesses reopen safely in a COVID-safe way? There's no plan for that either. This was just, it was supposed to be a D Day. Well, D stands for devastation. Victorians didn't get what they earned. Victorians have been told by the Premier, you take these sacrifices, you get rewarded. No reward, just another 3 weeks at least of harsh lockdown.
But what would your plan have been? Would you have linked opening up to case numbers?
Mike, I would have had a plan to get our kids back into school. They need that certainty. They need that hope.
I also but what is that plan? What is that plan, Michael? I mean, you say we needed a plan. I'm giving you a chance to say your plan.
Correct, and I've been talking for weeks now about priority vaccination for VCE students. They should be the first ones back into the classroom. The government should have been doing this for weeks and weeks, and those kids should have been able to get back into the classroom before the end of term 3. The government has just said today, no school for anyone face-to-face until maybe term 4, and they won't even commit to that. We need to give these kids some hope because they're doing it so tough. We need to make sure that there are businesses that can open in a COVID-safe way. Outdoor businesses, non-contact businesses like mobile pet groomers. Why on earth can't they open? This government thinks that writing a tiny cheque to keep businesses closed is an alternative to giving them a plan to safely open, and they're wrong about that. Families have been kept apart. Why can't the government say, look, we're going to allow you to meet people outside in small groups? That might be something that would give people a little bit of hope, a bit more of an emotional connection with each other through this tough time, but the government didn't even give them that.
Our health officials say the only way out of this now is vaccinations, but isn't the Prime Minister to blame for Victoria falling behind in the rollout, especially compared to New South Wales?
Well, no, I don't think so at all. We've got a Premier in Victoria who last Sunday stood up and said, we don't have enough supply. That's completely false, Mike. We've got truckloads of AstraZeneca, but the Labor Premier has been running a campaign against it. Now, today he said, oh, actually, AstraZeneca is safe, it's effective, and you should get it because it's available. It would have been great if he'd been saying that for the last 2 months instead of only starting to say that today. We're 20,000 vaccinations a day behind New South Wales. The longer this state government drops the ball on the vaccine rollout, the longer we're going to stay in lockdown, and we don't deserve that.
Yeah, but the Prime Minister gave New South Wales extra doses of Pfizer. That's one of the reasons why we're so far behind them. Was that fair?
No, but Mike, what is the difference between Pfizer and AstraZeneca? AstraZeneca is safe, it's effective, it's made right here in Melbourne. It's what the UK has been using for the last 12 months, and they're reopened. You know, they've got crowds at Wimbledon, they had crowds at the soccer. That's the sort of life we should be getting back to, but we're not, because we're doing 20,000 vaccinations a day fewer than New South Wales.
Your next chance to govern isn't until November next year. Hopefully this might be in our rear vision mirror, probably not, but will you conduct a Royal Commission into Victoria's pandemic response if you win?
Yeah, Michael, look, I've made that commitment, and there's one important reason why. It's not about witch hunts. Let me just say that up front. But we need to find out the truth about what has gone wrong. Because if we don't find the truth about the mistakes that were made last year, and even mistakes that are being made today, we'll be doomed to repeat them. And I am not prepared to see my state that I love go through this hell again. So yes, we'll have a Royal Commission. Yes, we'll find the truth. Yes, we'll learn the lessons, because we're not coming back to this.
Let's hope not. Michael O'Brien, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
Professor Catherine Bennett, Chair of Epidemiology at Deakin University, joins us now. Thank you very much for your time, as always, Professor. Some form of lockdown is set to drag on, it appears, for months. Are authorities approaching this the right way?
Unfortunately, we do have to get those vaccination rates up, and we do have to control the virus in the meantime to keep that impact at the hospital end, that serious illness we're still seeing, under control. So hopefully we will see the vaccination rates escalate faster than the health department is anticipating, and we can bring forward those dates. And if we do start to see better control of the virus in the meantime as well, then there's hope that we might see some further easing. So it really is in our hands now, because the main focus now is on the vaccine, and setting targets around the vaccination rate rather than case numbers is the right way to go. But we might achieve both control of the virus and get those numbers up sooner, and that'll be good for all of us.
They're aiming for 70% one-dose vaccination at a minimum to ease some of the restrictions. Are we on track, do you think, to hit that by September 23?
Yeah, well, that's what their uptake numbers are telling them. In this state, we're tracking well. But we've seen in places, particularly New South Wales, how they've been able to escalate beyond expectations, those rates. We've seen a lot more people going out and, regardless of their age group, having AstraZeneca, because they know, a vaccine now is more important than what vaccine you have when you don't have the choice at the moment. And we know that AstraZeneca is really, really effective at stopping people from having to go to hospital. And so, that's where we've got the ability to accelerate our vaccine rollout. And if that happens, our rate lifts, then we can get to 70% first dose before the 23rd. And I think that's what we should aim for. It will also bring that control forward of case numbers, and they won't escalate as much as they otherwise would. So I think that's what we want to get right, that mix of being really ambitious about what we can do with our vaccinations and clinging on to what we have to do for lockdown, because the harder we do that, the shorter we'll have to do it for. The faster we vaccinate, the shorter we'll have the lockdown as well.
Just on that 70% single-dose vaccination target, how effective is a single dose? Because we keep talking about being fully vaccinated.
That's right. Fully vaccinated gives you the maximum benefit, which is fantastic. That's 95% reduced risk of hospitalisation. And that's across all age groups. Lower risk in younger people, but it's still there, and we're seeing that. 50% of our people in hospital at the moment in Victoria are under the age of 40. But even with one dose, you've got 80% protection, 70 to 80%. So it's absolutely, you get an effect 2 weeks after that first dose where you start to reduce your risk of ending up in hospital. And that's something to think about. You get an immediate benefit. You're not just waiting for the whole long-term benefit, 80% reduction in risk.
Catherine Bennett, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
The Premier has announced students won't go back to school for the rest of Term 3 as COVID cases continue to grow during lockdown. For more now, let's go to education expert Adam Voigt. Adam, thank you very much for your time. It's certainly not what we parents wanted to hear, but is it the right call?
Yeah, look, it's one. I think, Mike, as parents and as educators, it's really hard for us to assume the scientific expertise to know if this is the right call or not, but we're living with it nonetheless. And it's tough. It's tough because we worry as educators that we're not doing the right thing by our kids, and as parents that we're not, they're not making the progress that we're looking for. But it's really important in times that when times are really tough and really hard, that we don't default to panic and division, that we continue to work together, that we continue to do the right thing in terms of looking after our kids' mental state, because one time or another, at some stage in the near future, we're going to need to do the work and the catching up that we're going to need to do to help these kids make sure that long term there's no big damage for them, and we can do that. We've just got to look after ourselves right now.
There is some hope for Year 12 students, though. Plans to vaccinate them will come next week. How critical is that rollout?
Yeah, I think it's important. And I think that it's important not only for the reality of our young people being able to complete what really has been an aim for them for a long time, is to be able to just complete those exams at the end of the year and sort of get through that rite of passage. But it's also important in terms of perception and feeling that we've actually given these young people the opportunity to finish their schooling with the opportunity to go to further study or out into careers that they deserve. The good news is that they still will do that. They will go to university. They will go to further education. There will be jobs for them to go out into, and we want to make sure that they've got that opportunity. Vaccination is obviously for so many of us an important piece, but for these kids it's critical.
You touched on it before, but they're effectively lost 2 years of learning, and there is a point where there's the burnout factor. They just don't learn anymore. Could some of these kids have to repeat the school year that they're in?
While that might be the case for a very small proportion, for the large proportion of kids, they're going to be okay. They will be able to get through this. They don't need to repeat school years, and we will catch them up. We just need to make sure that when they get back to school that they're in the condition to do some of that catching up. These are not lost days. These are not days unrecoverable. We can catch them up, and kids can be really malleable about their learning, and they can learn really quickly. So we need them in a great state to go back to school, and we need their teaching workforce protected and respected and looked after as well, so that they're in a great state to do that really important work with them.
You're always great for reassurances. Adam Voigt, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure, Mike.
Up next, a second man arrested over the suspicious disappearance of Melbourne woman Miriam Hamka. Plus, American troops race out of Kabul as the Taliban seizes their weapons. And a bocce medal drought broken in Tokyo. Dylan Alcott fights for gold in tennis. We're back soon here on 7. A second man has been arrested and charged over the suspicious disappearance of Melbourne woman Miriam Hamka. Oscar Newman was arrested at his Richmond home this morning and was taken into custody. The 26-year-old has been charged with assist offender and drug offences. It comes after Miss Hamka's former boyfriend, Toby Luffnan, was charged with her murder. Newman will face court later today. The 36-year-old's body is yet to be found. US President Joe Biden has labelled the exit from Afghanistan an extraordinary success. The last American troops evacuated Kabul with just minutes to spare, and the Taliban quickly moved into the airport. This video shows them wearing American uniforms and carrying their weapons before holding a mock funeral marking the end of America's presence there.
I was not going to extend this forever war, and I was not extending a forever exit.
The US says it will now focus on future security challenges such as China. Australia has won its first medal in the Paralympic sport of bocce in more than 2 decades, with Daniel Michel claiming bronze. And in just a few hours' time, Dylan Alcott will fight for gold in the tennis. Blake Johnson has all the details from Tokyo.
Bronze medals don't get much sweeter than the one decided in bocce today. Sydney's Daniel Michel putting on an absolute clinic, beating Great Britain's Scott McCowan 6-1. This is Australia's first medal in the sport since Atlanta '96. In fact, it's our first ever individual medal in the bocce.
It feels awesome to do that. I think, the whole magnitude of it, it'll take a while to settle in, but just super excited to be able to put together a game plan and execute it well.
Dylan Alcott needed almost 2.5 hours to beat Dutch teen Niels Vink in a semi-final at the wheelchair tennis. The two are really good mates, and you can see in the embrace after match point exactly what this means for Dylan.
I just said I was so proud of him, how well he played, and I just love the Paralympics. Can you tell?
He describes it as the best match he's been involved in, and he had to push his body to a place he wasn't sure it would go. Todd Hodgett's post-event interview is one to be remembered.
It's not over at all.
What does shot put mean to you, Todd?
Everything.
It saved my life. And all them knockers out there kept on knocking me. I came back and represent my country.
He and two other athletes were recorded as did not start after failing to meet call room timings in the shot put. But the big Tasmanian said life is too important to get hung up on disappointment. More medals in the pool for Australia, including bronze for a very emotional Cole Pearce in the 100 butterfly.
It just means the world to me to finally get on the podium. 18 months ago, I didn't think this was possible.
And Madison de Rosario scored her third medal in Tokyo, bronze in the 1500. There are more medals ahead in the pool tonight and the debut of a new para sport, badminton, here in Tokyo.
Up next, $1 million reward to catch a cold case killer who attacked a girl on her way to a milk bar. Plus, Melbourne's booming property market shows no sign of slowing down. And see a new sneak peek of the latest James Bond blockbuster. We're back soon here on 7. There's $1 million reward on offer to catch a cold case killer who murdered a Coburg teenager. As Georgia Comensoli reports, Denise McGregor disappeared on her way to a milk bar in 1978.
Good afternoon. This corner was the last place Denise McGregor was seen 43 years ago, and police are confident with this $1 million reward that somebody with information about her disappearance and murder will come forward.
The sheer unimaginable terror that Denise would have gone through in the moments just prior to her death, or the desperation of a family that have been searching for answers for the past 40 plus years. Denise's murder is particularly a devastating case.
Every time there is a rape or an abduction, or the whole Mr. Cruel sagas, the whole Tynong North, just everything that ever you go, yeah, what if, is it him?
On the day she was taken, 13-year-old Denise McGregor was out picking up food from a takeaway shop with her younger sister along Bell Street. After paying for the food with a $5 note, they started walking home when Denise told her sister to go on without her. Denise instead went towards a milk bar near the corner of Anderson and Bell Street for soft drinks, but was never seen again.
I would hope the bugger that's out there that did it looks over his shoulder every single day.
Police say with the combination of new information and advances in forensic technology that they'll be able to find and convict whoever did this.
It seems not even lockdown disruptions can hold back our booming housing market. CoreLogic's National Home Value Index rose 1.5% last month. While it's the lowest increase since January, it's still well above average. Hobart saw the biggest growth, 2.3%. Here in Melbourne, it was 1.2%. Let's take a quick look at Melbourne's roads right now.
Good afternoon, happy hump day. I'm Jess Miller in the Space Talk traffic chopper. Wouldn't be a Wednesday without a breakdown on the bridge. This, of course, is the Westgate Bridge. A couple of lanes closed off for outbound traffic. Crews are on scene, so this is causing some lengthy delays from all the way back before the Balti, but city-bound, dream run at this stage. Save big with Space Talk's takeoff sale and score big on features like 4G phone and GPS locator in a kid's smartwatch. They're on sale now at spacetalkwatch.com. Have a great arvo. We'll see you tomorrow with another look at the roads.
Now to a new sneak peek of the latest James Bond movie. It will be Daniel Craig's last outing as the iconic super spy.
Have you ever flown one of these things before?
Nope.
No Time to Die is set to hit cinemas in Australia in November. Let's just hope they're open. On this glorious first day of spring, Jane Bunn joins us. Jane, how warm is it?
Well, Mike, in the bright sunshine, temperatures have risen 6 degrees above average. The city has climbed right up to 23.5. It was even warmer in a few suburbs. This is what we've peaked at today. 24 in Watsonia and Moorabbin, 25 in Avalon. After early fog around Portland, there was nothing but blue skies with a touch of wispy high cloud. It is dry right across the state. And warm. Mildura has reached 29.9. Now, if it had have reached 30, it would have been the earliest 30 on record for Victoria. Now, why is it suddenly so warm? It's all thanks to a high that is sitting out to our east. Conditions are warming up over the interior of the country, so when we get a northerly wind, our temperatures jump up. This pattern continues tomorrow, but with a cold front approaching, these isobars are going to be squeezing together, making the wind strong. So it'll heat up even further, but only until that cold front crosses. In behind that, it is like winter once again. So sunshine continues tomorrow, but in a howling northerly, temperatures should rise around 8 to 12 degrees above average. That translates to mid-20s for much of the state, as shown in yellow, but the northwest rises into the low 30s in pink. Winds may be strong enough to do damage in these areas, the ranges, southwest and northern outskirts of Melbourne. It is warm and those winds howl until the cold front hits, passing through on Friday and Saturday with this band of rain. Melbourne is wettest on Friday afternoon and evening as temperatures plummet but the winds ease. Around the nation tomorrow, Sydney areas of fog and cloud, then increasing sunshine 24. Warm and sunny in Canberra and Hobart, strong winds in Hobart. Adelaide 30 degrees, dry but windy all day, then a cold change around 6 p.m, rain close to midnight. So to Victoria, it's warm, it's well above average in strong and gusty northerly winds, raising dust in the northwest. Sunny all day, but we'll start to see cloud in the west later, a sign of Friday's big change on the way. So Melbourne 26, sunny skies, but not pleasant. We've got a howling wind still going Friday morning.
OK, thanks, Jane. And that's all from the 7 Newsroom for now. Peter Mitchell's here at 6 from the 7 News team. Have a great afternoon.